Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast, spoiler special episode. My name is Martin Harries, your host. On this episode, we are talking plot lines, characters, and all things spoilerific. You have been warned. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Hello, podsters or podroonies, if you prefer. We are back again for one of our spoiler special episodes. And of course, I had to do an episode on Dune Part 2. Dune! People, it's Dune! And of course, it's clearly the best film of the year already, and hopefully will be by the end of December. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Let's face it, people. And of course, I can't talk alone. No, I am joined by two fellow worm piss drinking guests, Jake and Dustin. How are you guys from the movie Bonerz?
That's a hell of an intro.
Doing well. Thanks for having us back, man.
Happy to be part of the piss drinking squad, I guess.
Worm piss.
Yeah. You got to get your Na'vi fix in there somewhere. So, guys, if our listeners don't already know, what is your podcast about and where can we find you?
You can find us everywhere there's podcasts, YouTube and Spotify and all the things. And the Movie Bonerz podcast is just about enjoying movies, all kinds of movies. We're trying to run the gambit, not be pretentious, kind of the everyman show. Try to keep in mind that even the movies we dislike the most is probably somebody's favorite movie. And so don't shit on anything too hard, but talk some shit at the same time. So it's a good time. And we just did an episode on David Lynch's Dune 1984, and that was a wild ride. So if you like Dune stuff, you might be into it.
So initial reactions, guys, to Dune Part 2. First of all, how many times have we seen it? Just the once, or?
Just the once, yeah.
Yeah, just the once so far. I was hoping to be able to see it this morning before recording with you guys, but that didn't work out. So, just like, great movie, first off. But the most disappointing thing for me was I showed up to the theater determined to get my Dune popcorn bucket. They didn't have it. Man.
What?
Those things sold like hotcakes.
I got laughed at the concession stand because they thought I was joking when I told them that I wanted it. At least the movie kicked ass.
Like, I was going to use that later.
I was bummed.
For private stuff.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I think for me, I loved it, obviously. Yeah. I think I probably preferred the first movie, mainly probably because I've seen the first film like 3 or 4 times by this point, whereas I've only seen Dune Part 2 the once last night in a fairly new cinema in Salisbury where I live. Yeah, nice sofa seats. Unfortunately, I couldn't see it in IMAX, but I was pretty close to the screen, and at times you could tell that, this has been cropped. You could tell where, you should be able to see more here of the ships and things, the way it's framed. But yeah, absolutely loved it. Jake, how about you, sir?
Yeah, I really liked it as well. I really loved the first one. It's the first movie in a long time that I remember being in the theater and hoping it wouldn't end, that I just wanted it to keep going forever and I would be very happy. And so Dune Part 2 being delayed was a big disappointment, but finally being able to see it, I definitely really, really liked it. And I think I do also prefer the first one in just its excitement and pacing and things. But I think that once I see them as a package together, like see them back to back, they'll really click even more than they already did.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it felt like part 1 was like the first third of the book, and then part 2 is like 2/3 of the book. Did you guys feel like that? Certainly pacing wise.
Yeah, it was kind of weird because part 1, I mean, we're both big fans of it. Jake even described it as Star Wars for grown-ups at one point. And it's accurate. I actually told a coworker that because he was asking me about part 1 and part 2. And I told him, well, it's basically Star Wars for adults. Right. It's like the grown-up sci-fi. He saw them came back and was like, dude, that's the most perfect way to describe this movie. So props to you, Jake, for having perfect description there. When we saw part one, amazing movie. I love the pacing in it. I think I'm with you guys. I think I do prefer part one more, but that's because I like story driven. Like, I don't need constant action all the time. Nothing against the action in the second one. It's incredible, but I like the slower pacing of just diving into the story. When we did our Dune episode, we had to both kind of laugh at one point because we were like, oh, so Dune Part 2 just totally got spoiled for us, like, completely by watching this old movie.
Yeah, for some reason I didn't expect the David Lynch version from 1984 to be the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And so, like, but they fit it in like a 2 hours and 15 minutes, so it's shorter than even part one, the whole thing. And so they just kind of like rush and do a lot of bullet points, and then this happened, and then this happened. So there were parts in the watching Dune Part 2 where I was like thinking about the terrible CGI or weird things that happen in the old version. I was like, I kind of wish I didn't going into it. I would wish I saw this with fresh eyes. But then there are a lot of things that it doesn't do that were fresh twists or more interesting things. And so I think whether you saw the old version or not, this one definitely still is incredible and the quintessential version.
It's still incredible. Yeah. I did find myself when the worm writing part came up where I was like, please don't be as goofy looking. Please don't be as goofy looking. And then it was awesome. And I was like, thank God. Like,
it does still weirdly jump quickly from, we need to figure out how to learn to ride the worms. And it's a very dangerous thing to do and very intense as he gets up there and does it. And then they pretty quickly jump to, now it's just public transportation that everybody jumps on and they take it down to the south. And
like everybody's riding the worms. Like, okay.
Hop on the worm bus, people. Come on. Get your thumpers out.
Yeah. Old men and pregnant women, they're just fine on it. Yeah.
Interesting. They don't really show any of that of how they get on, but sure.
I'm with Jake. I did kind of have a moment with both the 84 one and part 2 of just like, there's no showing him or showing anybody learning how to actually ride this worm. They just kind of just go do it. And then they're able to do it. If I have one complaint, I guess it would probably be this is, they show Paul kind of having a fight and like really master climbing up on top of the worm, using the hooks and learning how to steer and like becoming one with the worm, if you will. But then it cuts to later on where it's like you said, Jake, public transportation, like they're putting people, you know, his mom is in a pod. She doesn't even have to climb. She just has to be carried and they get her on there and people are just riding it like it's, you know, going to your 9-to-5 job or whatnot.
Yeah, it's not like a horse where you go in like, whoa, you know, come on, get on now.
Right. They're just like, oh, we got worms. It's all good.
It's a giant worm. How is this happening?
Yeah.
But besides that, like, it still looked awesome. It was still a blast to watch. I was most excited to see Austin Butler as Fade, just to see his version of this character and all that.
Fade Ralph.
He didn't disappoint. I don't think he was as menacing as all the reviews or
the Sting in a space nappy or
hype was saying, and that's nothing against him, but there was like crazy. Let's talk that. The hype behind it. It was the highest rated movie on IMDb. I think it still is, actually. I think Rotten Tomatoes had it at like 98%. Not that that really matters, but crazy high ratings, crazy high hype.
Tons of word of mouth. Everybody's saying it's the most incredible thing. It's a masterpiece. And so I tried very hard to keep my expectations realistic. I was like, it's definitely not going to be perfect. Right. Just try to go into it open-minded. And it was great. But
people were saying it's like, oh, it's the new Empire Strikes Back. And
Christopher Nolan said that.
I was like, whoa, calm down.
The new Dark Knight and all this. And it's like, holy shit.
Give it some time.
It was still badass. It was still incredible. But it was kind of hard going into it, trying to keep a level head or trying to keep like the hype and expectation kind of at a reasonable level because of all the noise around it.
Yeah.
But I'm just happy so many people have seen it. Granted, it hurts me in our draft, but at the same time, I get excited when people are going out in droves to the theater because I think that's movies like this you have to watch on the big screen. You need the biggest screen possible for this. So
yeah, and it's kind of like a cultural phenomenon. Everybody's talking about it and excited to see it. Yeah, I agree. I think Austin Butler was very exciting. I don't know if I'd put him on the upper echelon of movie villains like some people have talked about, but he was really, really good, and I loved the style. I think my favorite scene was when they're on the Harkonnen planet, and it's that infrared camera choice, and it's so different and interesting. That was really incredible.
Yeah, I loved kind of the subtlety there with that scene because they describe their planet as having like a black sun. So I love the subtlety when like Baron Harkonnen like comes out to his little booth and like you have some color like on the inside, but it's subtle enough that it's not like obvious like we're inside now it's outside lighting. It's interesting listening to Denis Villeneuve with his interview about how they shot that, you know, as you said, Jake, with infrared cameras, with Craig Fraser being the DP, the cinematographer. And they were saying, they warned the studio like, we can shoot it like that and it will be like this chrome black and white incredible looking footage, but there's no going back. You can't add color to it.
Yeah, it's a big commitment.
This is what it's going to be. We can't change it in post. So, but yeah, it looked incredible.
I loved it. I thought that was it was such a contrast to the, you know, rest of the film. I thought it was the best decision that they made in terms of how they were shooting all that. That was very exciting when it shifted like that, and the subtle color that you saw in the shadows and stuff. I was just like, this might be this scene alone. And that was even before the actual fighting.
Yeah.
And I love the little scenes with like the fireworks, this gloopy black firework stuff. That was great, especially
very cool effect
in terms of the lighting when Lea Seydoux is talking to Austin Butler in those scenes in the corridor. And I kind of like that scene as well. She was just like a great seductress there from Lea Seydoux. And you assume that like Austin Butler is the one in control in these scenes, but no, it's her. She's Bene Gesserit.
Yeah.
Gesserit. Whatever that goddamn word is. Witch person.
I mess it up every time. Don't worry, man.
Yeah. Bene Gesserit. There you go. Yeah, she's the one in control. And yeah, she was brilliantly seductive with that. And there's no surprise she is a Bond girl. But
Yep.
Yeah, she was great. Again, maybe not enough of her for me, but she serves a great purpose in the story.
Well, there's always, you know, Dune Messiah at some point in the future that we don't know.
Yeah, apparently they are writing it now.
I'm sure she'll have a larger role.
They are writing it now, but I don't know whether that will be Denis Villeneuve's next movie. He's hinting that he might need a break and might do something else before he does Dune Messiah. But
yeah, it sounded like he was working on like 4 different things.
Yeah.
Maybe not 4 different things, but like
yeah. I think my favorite scene though, going back to where Timothée Chalamet like rides the sandworm for the first time. Like I love that moment where like it's kind of a great build up, you know, where a lot of the Fremen are like, oh, holy shit, it's huge. What's going on? He's going to die.
Yeah.
But then like as it comes across the dune, like I love that moment where you kind of see the curve of the mouth for the first time, and I literally said holy shit out loud as it was coming through. But no one heard me because like the sound is just insane with the mixing. And literally I don't know whether it was because I was quite close, but my chair was vibrating because the sound was so powerful in my cinema. It was insane.
I love it when movies get that loud. I get excited, especially big films like this, when you're not even necessarily. I didn't get to see it in IMAX. I want to, but I didn't get to. But the sound was still pretty incredible. I love it. You know, Denis movies and Nolan's movies, they both do this with sound where it becomes such an important part to the whole film and the experience of it. That's what they're giving you, is a full experience. Yeah. And they're masters at that. Yeah, the sandworm busting through that like dune that he's on, that sand dune, when it cuts it in half and he has to jump. That whole editing and the sound of him in the sand and all that was a little like overwhelming, but in the best way, you know?
Yeah. It's like a roller coaster.
And my God, they chucked a lot of sand at Timothée Chalamet. Or it felt like it anyway. I was actually squinting at the screen going, oh my God, that's a lot of sand.
I know. I felt like I needed goggles in the theater.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm guessing there's probably is some CG added there, but
probably a little bit.
I can imagine just they got a load of sand. Like, watch out, Timothy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what? Why? It would just be a little bit of sand, right? Oh, yeah, sure.
Close your mouth.
I think it's good for him. Like, get that actor super dirty. Let's just do this.
Bring in the trucks. 2 tons of sand. Come on.
Yeah. Make it real.
The final battle, I felt, was not too overblown like a Marvel movie. You have like these, frankly, incredible shots of all these like sandworms coming at the Imperials at the end, and a few great one-ers on Zendaya and a few other characters on the ground with some pretty cool fight choreography. And then Josh Brolin's character providing the dessert, of course, as he describes it. And then the focus is kind of inside this mini like metal pop-up temple with the Emperor and the Harlequins hiding inside. So I quite liked that change up, that they weren't kind of focusing, you know, just on the battle stuff of like, oh, look at this looks really cool. You know, we're still focusing on the storytelling, which was great. And it was just kind of just great anticipation of what was going to happen at that temple door. Are they going to break it down? What's going to happen here? There aren't many Imperial soldiers inside. Not really. So what's going to happen? So I quite liked the fact that we moved on fairly quickly.
Yeah, they overwhelmed them pretty completely, and when you have 3 giant sandworms busting through, that'll do it. It seems like.
Yeah, I'm with you, Martin. I liked that the focus wasn't left on the giant battle outside, because it easily could have been like that's where all the focus is going to end up. I was really glad that they moved it inside fairly quick. I mean, you got your big action, but then it moved on, because it's still, at the end of the day, this is Paul's story. So we need to see where Paul's going and all the pieces that are moving around on his chessboard, essentially.
Yeah.
I think the balance between the action and the story in this one was really well done. I personally would have liked to see Paul kind of going a little bit more with Paul, just kind of coming to terms with his potential role and who he's destined to be.
Right.
But then again, we have Messiah coming out at some point in the future, so I'm sure that's going to be kind of the essential main point of that one. So I feel I'm still going to get what I was wanting.
Yeah, Capper.
When we get that. Yeah. Did you like how things wrapped up with the action, especially, Jake? It didn't fall into these like Marvel tropes, which some directors, you know, might feel the need to try and go down that and like, okay, let's have little cool moments with all the different characters that we've set in place here, but they didn't really do that.
Yeah, I didn't think that it wasn't like a huge action movie. I thought that it was very well spread out. There are certain points of interesting or explosions or incredible scenes, both CGI and practical explosions and things. But then also there was a lot of long stretches of character stuff and very deep and interesting sci-fi politics. And I thought that it did seem like in the quieter moments or in the slow moments, it retold or redrove home the point of things a little bit more than it needed to at times. There were some times when I was like, yeah, I got that already, or I already understood the goal or the motivation of this character, but it wasn't much. And it was well spread out, that right around the time when I was like, yeah, I already know this, or I already know where we're going. Then they just moved on and they were already doing something else, or or in a big action thing. And I think the action at the end especially was very exciting. It was a good climax, but it wasn't marvelly at all, like you're saying. It was very kind of, I guess, more practical, more realistic and historical as far as like an actual epic or a civil war or something. It was
a battle would play out.
Yeah, I got I love the symmetry between the beginning, the end of, I guess, the beginning of this movie. That is the recap of the end of the first movie, where they're burning the Atreides bodies, and then at the end there's just another changeover of power and another succession of the Emperor's appointed stewards of Dune, and now the Harkonnen are being burned, and it's just kind of the rise and fall of empires and leaders, and very human connection to the story. I think even though it's an epic out in space, it's very grounded in just human history, it felt like.
Yeah, definitely. Craig Fraser, the cinematographer here, I found some incredible shots. There was one which kind of which made me feel kind of silly when I think Stelgar is showing Lady Jessica around the Fremen temple for the first time, and he shows her like where all the water goes after the Fremen die, and you get this nice big wide shot of the temple, and I'm just like, where's the water? I don't see water here, and what's going on?
I thought it was a chasm, like a deep thing.
Yeah, that doesn't look very impressive. What's going on? But it's actually the reflection of the water. It's so still and so calm that it's just a big mirror reflection of the water, and I was just like, oh my God. I only noticed that it was water when someone was adding water into it, when you see ripples. I was just like, the amount of patience the crew must have had to get that right, to get the right angle, must have been insane.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Man, that temple scene with the water, because it's supposed to convey like this is, sacred. It's basically holy to them and all that. You don't disturb this. You don't drink it, definitely. But like when he shows her the temple and the water and that reflection, I thought like, this is great, because I totally feel like this is sacred. Like that water, I almost feel like you don't even necessarily want to look at the water. It's like, basically looking at like maybe the
dead people.
Like some memorial, for tragedy or whatever. It's just, it instantly conveyed that somber kind of feel to it, where you're just like, ooh, this is intense, and it's water.
The meaning of it, the depth of it, is something I didn't get in any other version of Dune, or the only other version, the 84 version. I didn't get that it was all of the previous Fremen who have died and now contributed to that, and they're basically planting seeds that they will never see grow or never take advantage of. They're feeding into this thing in the hopes of some paradise in the future. It was a pretty powerful, when Rebecca Ferguson, who's great in everything, when she talks about how many souls it took to fill that, it was very powerful.
Yeah. You mentioned Rebecca Ferguson there, Jake. I find she's one of the most fascinating actors around at the moment, and I loved her in the first one. A really powerful figure. And this version of the character in this story, I found really fascinating. She is a bit more menacing in this, and I love that little moment with...
She's kind of scary, dude.
Yeah, like I love that little like psychic chat she has with Charlotte Rampling at the end of like, I was right about Paul kind of thing. It was a bit, a little scary. Yeah, what did you guys think about Rebecca Ferguson in this?
Yeah, I think she perfectly balanced the motherliness towards Paul and also towards her unborn daughter, but then also very manipulative of this whole society, that we need to convince this whole Fremen population that he is the Messiah and that he will save them so that he can ascend to power and fulfill his prophecy and all that stuff. And so she didn't have any issue with that. And it was a great duality of gentle and terrifying at the same time.
And also, she didn't really have a choice, because when they, get to the temple, they were like, "Yeah, our reverend mother is dying. Like, you either become our new reverend mother, or we'll have to kill you." So she didn't really have a choice anyway. So that was just a really interesting point from a story perspective.
Yeah. After she's like reverend mother, and she's talking to the daughter, and she's got that like kind of understanding of, we're going to aim for the doubters, or the quiet, kind of the
vulnerable,
the feeble ones first. We'll convince those guys first, and then we'll start moving up the ranks. I was like, when she starts having that kind of like manipulate, where she's plotting her manipulation for it, instantly I was, and Jake, you know me well, so I'm sure you get where I'm coming from with this. The moment that happened, I was like, nope, this is bad roads to be going down. Like
forming a cult.
Right? Like, no, we can't be doing this.
She's talking to a baby. Don't trust her.
Oh man, that moment I was like, she went from being this like super loving, devoted mother, keeping her son safe, and now she's scaring the crap out of me, because I feel like there's some cultish things going on here, lady. Like,
from loving mother to reverend mother pretty fast.
So let's be careful on this path, all right?
And I kind of love how experimental it got with those scenes, those shots of the baby inside her womb, like very blue and very dark. And there was a moment where the baby opens its eyes for the first time, and it's all blue. That kind of freaked me out a little bit. I was like, oh shit, okay, what the hell?
It did a great job of showing you how the effects of the water of life as she was taking it, that the obvious implications of her child as well. And I think it was very, like you called it, experimental. I think that's a good way to put it, because I can't think of another movie that's really taken a human baby inside the mother and done interesting things like that with it, treated it as that kind of other person that is now a part of the plotting and manipulation, and she's now fully aware of all of history and all of the memories of all these mothers, just as Jessica's character is. It was very interesting.
Yeah, you could tell they've definitely put a lot of thought into like how, this isn't just a baby inside someone's womb. I felt like if you're just going to do it that literally, it would have looked a lot different. So there was a lot of like negative space in there of where is this embryo child actually, that was good.
Is in the cosmos, or hard to tell.
I was just happy for two parts involving the baby. One, it resembled nothing like the Twilight baby. Thank God. Let's face it, CGI babies do not track well in Hollywood.
Possibly the best CGI baby so far.
Right. But also, like, typically when movies do kind of the telepathy scenes with, the talking without speaking, it comes off just so bad and so cheesy.
Like the wolves in Twilight, you're saying?
Like the wolves in Twilight.
Everything goes back to Twilight.
It all goes back to Twilight. But I didn't feel that it was cheesy. I thought, like, the way that they handled the telepathy between, the baby and the mom, like, it was handled well. I like that she's still interacting with the world around her at the same time that she is speaking out loud to her baby. I thought that was really cool. And then I also couldn't help but think, like, man, if I was one of those people walking around and I heard her, like, telling her daughter, unborn daughter, like, quiet you, I'd be like, this lady's crazy, man.
What do we make of Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides? Like, there's definitely, as we've kind of spoke about, like, there's this Messiah struggle. It's certainly the focus of this film. It's just fascinating, like, the subtle change in his acting when he drinks the water of life, or worm piss, that makes him see all the possible futures. Then he basically goes on a revenge mission using, the Fremen's faith in him as a weapon, kind of, for revenge against the Emperor. So, because obviously he was very reluctant to go there. at one point, but then when he does drink it, actually, it's interesting how Denis Villeneuve treats kind of his death scene, because we don't see him die or anything. We just cut straight to this very surreal scene with Anya Taylor-Joy. And it's revealed she's in the movie, and she's at the coast. So, you got a lot of this paradise representation, and then the next thing we know, Chani, I think, is running through the temple to see if he's alive. So it's interesting that we don't see him actually die. It's him kind of coming back to life again. And it didn't, I don't know. It didn't feel as dramatic as it could have been, maybe. But I don't think Villeneuve was maybe trying to go down those very tropey scenes as you would expect, kind of thing.
Yeah, I was never really worried that he had died or was going to die. But I don't know if that's because I saw the 84 version and kind of knew the story already.
Right.
where they do show him die and then everyone cries and then he opens his eyes with the worst blue light overlay on the eyes. I liked that they didn't show him quote unquote die, because like Jake said, you're not that worried that Paul's not going to make it the whole time. It has to be in the back of your head of this is the middle part of a full story. He's the main character. They've already alluded to him having a full future, so they're not going to kill him now.
No, yeah.
So I thought avoiding showing him die, avoiding that whole, like you said, Martin, Hollywood trope, I thought that was a great idea. I was pretty thankful I didn't have to watch him quote unquote die, because that 84 version with that same scene is weird, man.
It's David Lynch for you.
Yeah, the way Lynch and the studio made him kind of do handling that scene is just odd. I was so glad it was vastly different in this version. So thankful.
It's interesting with Paul's and Chani's relationship. Maybe not as strong as it could be, maybe, for me. And I think, and it's probably my only real criticism of the film, but there's, they're both acting their asses off, but because there's so much going on, I feel like the emotions that the film is trying to hit at the end don't quite work as well as they maybe could have. Plus, at times it feels like a bit choppy. There's a moment where Paul is tasked to travel across the desert on his own, and Chani catches up with him pretty quickly, and then before you know it, Paul and Chani are battling a spice harvester. So they're both great in the movie. I really loved both of them. I think they're huge stars, and deservedly so, just through their acting talent alone. But maybe, I don't know, maybe an extra 2 to 5 minutes, just that, really, to really drive home the emotions that both characters are feeling towards the end, maybe.
I thought that the beginning of their interaction was good and cute flirting moments, and you can definitely see she's very much kind of standoffish initially, and then he does a good job of kind of being charismatic and kind of going around her expectations of him to a way that she actually lets him in, not just into herself as a relationship, but also into the Fremen culture. She's becomes accepting of him. I thought that part was done well. But then, it does kind of, I think, speed along their relationship to the end, where she's very much blindsided, I think, as the audience is, that he jumps ship and chooses his path forward and the hand of the Emperor's daughter instead of her.
Yeah, she's amazing in that moment.
That probably would have landed a little bit more if you had a little bit more time with them and their actual romance, I guess. But I liked it overall and liked their dynamic. You kind of question how much of it, I think by the end of it, you question Paul's motives more, how much he was feeling it and how much he was using her to fulfill the prophecy. There's all these moving parts of you see the chosen one, and if so, he has to do these certain things, and how much of that is planned versus how much of that is happenstance and just comes about. You're always left wondering that when you look back on it.
Yeah,
which is good, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like that. I'm with you guys. I think in the middle part, when they do that kind of where they're actually together and stuff, I would have liked to see a little more of that, just their actual connection and emotional connection, because they're kind of on separate paths.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like they find that common ground where they can be together. I think showing a little more of that would have been really cool. That way, when Paul shocks everyone and does not choose Chani, you can be a little more angry at him and understand her frustration and her decision at the end.
Yeah, you had asked about Timothy Chalamet and how he kind of does that flip after he drinks the water of life. I think that was well done, because he is, I think, afraid of fulfilling that prophecy and going south and causing this all the tragedies and the Holy War and everything that'll kick off if he does. But once he drinks it, I think that because he was afraid to go south, that ties back to the whole fear is the mind killer thing, that he sees the possible future that he could achieve and is filled with that confidence, overcomes that fear, and kind of goes full ahead for that. And then that does kind of make him need to leave other things off to the side, like his personal romances.
Definitely. I feel like everything kind of comes together, the visuals, the sound, the acting, when Paul Atreides, Timothy Chalamet, is walking towards the War Council, and you've got, I think, this kind of worm is coming up through the sand behind him as he's walking towards the people. And just, it feels so huge and so epic, where, you know, and the sound, the music is just as good as it gets from Hans Zimmer in that point.
Yeah.
And he's walking through the crowd, and he's just walking through like a tight bubble of people to the temple. And when he gets to the temple, everyone's just like, yeah, you're not allowed to speak, but he does not give a shit. And he's like going to say his piece. And he's really kind of aggressive with the Fremen. And at that point, you're like, he is acting like Fade Ralpha right now. And you don't really know where his faith and where his motivation lies right now. Is he with the Fremen, or is he just playing the long game to take down the Emperor?
Even his mom Jessica's like, pump the brakes because you're coming off a little too aggressive.
Yeah, when he starts when he walks into the temple and starts like calling people out with their secrets and like the knowledge that he suddenly has, I was at first, because I mean, no offense to Timothy Chalamet, but like he's kind of a small dude. Like he doesn't, you see him in interviews and stuff, he does not come across,
doesn't have physicality, does he?
He does not come across as like intimidating. But I'll tell you what, if I had some scrawny dude who just seemed to come back from the dead and was suddenly like enunciating everything he said with that kind of voice and getting in your face and then calling you out on some of your own, like, oh, no one was supposed to find that out. Or like, you're not supposed to know that little tidbit about our planet. Like, yeah, good job, Timothy. You conveyed being a little intimidating. You did a good job of showing this like decision to follow your prophecy. It kind of like goes to his head almost, in my opinion. It seemed like that absolute power can absolutely corrupt. And it's like, oh, we're watching these early steps of that process. Where it goes from there, I guess we'll find out. But I thought he did a really good job with portraying the subtlety or the subtle changes from being kind of just like reluctantly on this path because he's kind of forced to, and just kind of like, I really just want to avenge my dad and avenge the name and the honor. And now he's like on this whole, that'll also be a motivation for revenge. But now he's like, oh, I am the Messiah. You guys have been telling me this. Now I am him. And now you kind of have to fear me. I thought he did a really good job. I think his acting chops have really come out, especially in part 1 and now with part 2. I'd like to see him follow these kinds of dramatic roles a little more. I know he's got kind of a weird filmography under his belt, but this was like him as Paul. This is a good role for him. This is cool to watch.
Yeah. I do think Zendaya is amazing as Chani as well, and I find it fascinating. The last shot of this film is of her waiting for a worm bus, and she's the only one that goes back home to, you know, that wherever she's going. Frankly, it's all a lot of desert, but doesn't stay with the others. The film definitely sets up and portrays that the Messiah definitely is not all what they think he is. You know, I think that's the whole reason why they're ending it on Chani. Really, you know, she just wants the Fremen to be free and basically thinks that Paul Atreides is just a replacement for the Emperor. And it definitely reminded me of a few. I mean, there's a lot of films that kind of go down this road of where you have, you know, a grand, rich society that's suppressing a lower class society who are poor and deprived.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. 2 films came to mind for me. One not so good one, but one incredible one. Like the one really good one is kind of The Godfather, where Vito Corleone dies and Al Pacino has to step up, and yet he closes the door on Faye Dunaway in that movie. It's kind of similar thing here. And the other one, some reason I'm thinking of this.
Avatar.
Hey, yes, obviously, best film ever made. The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, where you have, what was it, Julianne Moore's character is the leader of kind of District 12, 13, and she is kind of the Paul Atreides character in that film, and yet Jennifer Lawrence kind of shoots her, spoilers for that, but she shoots her at the end because she basically sees that Julianne Moore is just replacing Snow. You know, there's no difference here, and it's kind of very similar thing.
Yeah, it's the same evil, but a different face.
So it's interesting how they kind of leave that kind of open, and it's interesting. I've not read Dune Messiah, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and how conflicted Paul is going to be going forward, and how Chani is going to deal with this. Is she going to go down the Jennifer Lawrence route in Hunger Games, or are we going to see a full-blown Al Pacino in space?
Yeah, I definitely liked how she's the only one that doesn't kneel for him at the end. And just walks out. You do wonder if she'll be in the next one. I haven't read anything about it or know anything about it, but I have seen Denis Villeneuve say that he wrote this version of Paul based on what Frank Herbert intended with Messiah, that most people misunderstood the messianic character of Paul and wanted to clarify that it's actually more of a warning. And so as he ascends to power, it'll be very interesting to see where that goes and the politics of it after that.
Yeah, I was very proud of Chani at the end of this, that she doesn't kneel, that she doesn't follow the fanaticism of everyone else, that she's not viewing this as salvation or immediate salvation and change, but like this could be very troublesome, like this could be disastrous for everybody to just blindly follow through with this stuff just because you think this is the proper prophecy or this is the way to believe. I really respected her character for that, and her decision at the end made me like, oh, I think Chani might be my favorite character right now. Like, keep it up. Like, keep it up.
Keep going, Chani. You can do this.
Right? Like, don't fall for their shit.
Yeah, I love how kind of you have all these like, is he really the Messiah moments? You have that at the end when like all the 5 houses don't agree as for Paul Atreides to be the new emperor. They're like, fuck no, what are we on about? And you would feel like that is quite realistic. We've never met this guy. As far as they're concerned, Leto Atreides is the leader of House Atreides before all this shit went down on Arrakis. So there's no reason why they should agree to this.
Yeah. And they just learned he's still alive. They didn't even know that until 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but I think what's really interesting is you get a lot of that. Is he really the Messiah kind of thing with Javier Bardem's character Stilgar? Because I think he provides kind of some comedy here for me.
He was great comedy.
And also gives the film this interesting feeling that is he just a fanatic and too obsessed with the so-called Messiah? He's almost kind of framed in comedy moments for me. Like the amount of times he says, "It is written," you know, like when he does something good.
It like became an instant meme.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw it Thursday night. I got home, and then Friday morning, I was like getting ready to go to work, and I was just kind of mindlessly scrolling, and it is written memes were all over the place. And I was like, dude, the movie hasn't even officially been out for more than like a couple hours. Holy crap.
But it's an interesting change up with that character from the first film. Like from the first film, he feels very much like a badass and someone that you really shouldn't cross, you know, for Paul. And if Paul does anything wrong in terms of the way of life of how the Fremen go about their life, you know, he's going to be the first one to let him know that.
Yeah, I expected him to be much more skeptical, letting them into the society and not the comedy side of it. But I like it in the end. I think that it's really great to have him kind of cutely think that he's the Messiah and kind of encourage him and all of that stuff. But then that ends up being a major motivator for everybody accepting that he is, that he kind of just keeps stoking this idea and everybody ends up accepting it. And it kind of becomes part of the reason that this whole cult is formed around him.
You brought it up, Martin, of like the, is Paul the actual like Messiah? Is this actually happening? And I love that kind of conflict for as the audience. Like, is Paul actually going to pull off being the Messiah, or is he actually the Messiah? Mm-hmm. And I think with Stilgar, I kind of took it as, yeah, he was funny because he's like, he becomes very innocent. But I also kind of, the more I thought about it, the more I kind of feel the Fremen are so, especially Stilgar, are so desperate for this prophecy. They're so desperate for this salvation to show up so that now Paul is here and boxes are being checked off of like, oh, this, you know, this coincides with what our prophecy is showing and saying. Yeah. It's almost like just that it's kind of sad in a way of just that full desperation of we're just gonna, this has to be it because a couple things we've been able to connect a couple of these dots. So
it did a really, really good job of showing how important religion or faith is to people if you're living in a more desperate position, if you're in a more desperate part of the world than your own faith. You need something to hold on to, something to sustain you in that terrible place. It illustrates that point, I think, very, very well.
Definitely. So Florence Pugh is in this as Princess Irulan. Not a lot of her in this film, but as always, she's very captivating when she is on screen. Some great little scenes with her and the Reverend Mother and Christopher Walken. So,
yeah, my only complaint about Florence Pugh's character is that I wish they didn't show every single outfit that she had in the promo materials because they're incredible looking and I love every one of them. But they do show all of them to you.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Apparently, like, it was such a faff with her getting in and out of the chainmail. So they ended up just, like, CGIing some of those shots.
That's funny.
Putting that, just sticking it on her face. But
Florence Pugh and CGI clothes, man. What is it with her?
Yep, it's her thing now.
Yeah. Just leave him off. That's what I would say. So.
I didn't even know Christopher Walken was in this movie. I wasn't even paying attention that closely. I mean, it's a huge cast, so he kind of gets lost. But he showed up. I was like, I had no idea that Christopher Walken was the Emperor in this.
I was so happy to see him in there.
Yeah.
Like, I was really bummed. Man, there are times I hate the internet so much. You guys have to be just as sick and tired of seeing, like, leaked set photos or leaked casting things for any movie anymore. Everything is leaked and spoiled before anything comes out. I was really bummed that they had spoiled that Anya Taylor, what's her name? Joy was in it.
Oh, at the premiere.
I was bummed that everyone already knew she was in it because it was so obvious watching the movie, knowing that she was going to pop up. But her scene, I was like...
She was the child, the sis.
This was supposed to be a huge, holy crap moment for audiences. And thanks to the internet and assholes on it, they totally took that away. I was kind of really bummed about that.
Yeah. And then she showed up at the premiere. I'm like, oh, she's in it then.
They confirmed. She may have had the weirdest outfit I've seen for someone, just the face hole.
Nothing gets weirder than Zendaya's C-3PO outfit that she wore.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. That's right. Yeah. That's an odd decision too.
Yeah, they went all out.
What is it with these celebrities and their outfit choices?
We have an ass window.
Yeah.
Gotta have an ass window in there.
Yeah, that was weird.
I'm not going to lie. I was expecting goldfish to be swimming around.
Oh, God. That is dangerous for the goldfish. But yeah, Christopher Walken, I love the dude, man. Yeah. I think he's incredible in these final scenes with Paul. Like when he's saying that the reason we killed your father, Leto Atreides, is that he basically had a heart and was a weak man, basically saying he was like messing up the order of things in the galaxy is why he killed him. You know, when he's delivering those lines, they sort of have more impact coming from him. Like you've got to get that casting right if someone's going to say these type of lines, and yeah, he definitely delivers. The only thing is though, when I watched it, I feel like he missed the kiss on Paul's hands. I'm like, he did not make contact.
I was like, I thought it was like maybe a character choice that he's like, I'm not actually going to kiss your ring. I'll just
way too much sand for me. No thanks.
Yeah.
How do I know there's no spice on your hand?
Yeah.
Dave Bautista.
Dude, I love Dave Bautista.
He was amazing. He definitely provides like the comedy of the Harkonnen side of things. Again, like Butler just randomly smashes a dude's face in on the monitor.
I'm here for it, man.
Yeah, that scene, his physicality in that scene, it's so quick, but you can tell he just let everything go and went beast mode on it. And I was like, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that he doesn't like actually keep control and kind of screws up all the rest of the stuff, but he was formidable at that point.
I kind of loved how cowardly he becomes with this huge bulk that he has, you know, and I love that scene where he's kind of like running scared from the Fremen, you know, at night, and beautifully shot as well and directed, where the Fremen are just coming out of nowhere to taking them all out. That was great, and him running scared.
Cowardly Dave Bautista. You don't see it very often, but he conveys it pretty well.
Yeah, he has great range.
Yeah. He's a really good actor. I think he's really underrated.
Absolutely.
And obviously he was in Blade Runner 2049 briefly. Completely different character.
He's awesome. I get excited when I see his name on cast lists.
Yeah, I don't even think we've seen the best from him yet.
Yeah. Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck. Again, not in it much. But again, brings some like real gravitas to the final scenes and kind of some comedy in a different way, where he has no idea how to use the water. You know, when Channy's like, he's a fucking idiot. Look at him. And the way he like pulls Channy down in the war council scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You felt like he wasn't just there to make up the numbers. He felt like an important character still. Like, because he finds the nuclear warheads for the dessert scene.
Well, he's got such a strategic mindset in that military way of thinking and seeing how everything might play out, the good and the bad of it. He has a pretty deep understanding of the honor and the traditions and stuff of all of the houses. So I think, and Brolin is also one of those actors that's just like, he's so fucking good.
Yeah.
It's so goofy thinking like, I was introduced to him from the Goonies, and you're like, how'd we go from the bright red headband and you doing like lifting your dumbbells to here we are, you're like constantly imposing, but a great character actor where he's just, anytime he's on screen, he's formidable, whether he's just talking or doing action. Big Josh Brolin fan. Like, the dude is just incredible.
Yeah. And I really love how he kind of shows up at a great time in the story, comes back because Jessica leaves, and now he kind of fills that void of a comfortable friend for Paul that understands everything that the Fremen don't understand. He knows kind of the stakes, he knows the houses, he knows the Emperor and kind of everything. I think it's he has such loyalty towards Paul that it's very different than the loyalty that he earns from the Fremen, which is much more religious fealty. And Josh Brolin's character is just more of a friend, that he's just a family friend and has committed to this house, and no matter what, he'll be there kind of thing.
Yeah, completely devoted to Paul. There's no doubting his loyalty. Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen is amazing. Like, he's great in the first one, and again, not enough of him, especially in Black Oil for me. I kind of love the moment when he's been struck down by one of the Imperial soldiers and he's kind of grasping at the throne. That was a great moment where kind of all these kind of Harkonnen characters, typically of evil characters, they kind of don't really care about each other. They just, each individual Harkonnen just wants to be on the throne, you know,
and will devour each other given the chance. Yeah, I love that scene, and I love when Dave Bautista's character is screwing up and he's kind of in the oil bath behind the door and you don't know what happened, but as soon as he goes inside and looks over, there's those 2 dead women, I think, and there's just like this blackness around them on the floor, and you're like, what happened? What is this guy even capable of? You've never even known he's the most terrifying figure.
It very different from the 1984 one, which Jake and I couldn't help but laugh a lot at the Baron in that version.
Oh, it's wild
because it's different. But Stellan Skarsgård is like, he's terrifying, man. For being in the movie such a little amount, but every scene he's in, it's instantly like, don't mess with this guy. I would never ever want to be in the same building, let alone planet, as this guy. Like, he's terrifying because you don't know exactly how much power he has or what he's actually able to pull off. And clearly he's done some pretty heinous acts to get where he's at now. And if he's kind of been a father figure-ish to Fade, then you know that influence has to be just the epitome of evil. So Stellan Skarsgård, he does such a great job of portraying that.
Yeah.
Just, you know, we talked subtlety earlier with Timothy Chalamet. I think Stellan Skarsgård has even more range with the subtlety because he, you know, quiet kind of mumbled lines, but every time he speaks, I mean, you're scared. You feel it. So. Yeah,
I love those moments with him because he doesn't really have to do much with his face because, like, he's in this big fat suit, this big body suit, and it all kind of works with him with what he's doing on his face. And I kind of love, like, this. I think in the book it's described as a belt, but it's more like attached to his spine that keeps his weight up, so he's not dragging across the floor. But it's really interesting with the sound effects as well. You're never really sure like how powerful he is with that technology on his back. So yeah, he is quite an intimidating villain.
Yeah, the fact that he can fly, you don't even know how quick he could be if he wanted to be. He's intimidating in the way, taking it back to the adult Star Wars stuff. He's kind of the Jabba the Hutt character. He's like, oh, he looks kind of silly on first glance, but he's actually a very powerful, very dangerous gangster that controls way more than you expect. And I get that vibe from him for sure.
Yeah. Charlotte Rampling as the Reverend Mother Moheen is great as well. Always always a powerful presence on screen. Like I love the confidence in some of the shots where she's wearing her veil and you can barely see her face, but you can definitely see her eyes, like very piercing eyes she has. Just such a great presence in this film.
Yeah, and I love that's the main connection that I made to the first movie was the end when Paul tells her to be silent. And it just goes all the way back to their first meeting in the library where she tells him to put his hand in the box. She silences him at that first meeting as well. And it's just a great
callback
closing of that loop. Yeah.
I think that's everything. Anything else you guys want to talk about for this movie?
I was very impressed by the digital effects. I assume a lot of it is digital effects, in particular the
worms.
Emperor's ship, when the Emperor's ship came over and the reflection of everything, I was like, that looks unbelievably good.
Yeah. Like the way, I don't know, this heat was kind of being reflected around it. This chrome ship, that was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like spice dust and all this stuff was just very effective.
Also, one thing about like the veils, which possibly was unintentionally funny when when they're in the stadium and the Baron's there, I think, and he's talking to someone next, or it might be Lea Seydoux. She's talking to someone next to her, and all you see is just like a loincloth. Like there's no face there in a close up. I'm just seeing a white sheet.
It's crazy to have like such a huge cast with such incredible names, right? And then half of the cast, you are covering their faces completely. You're like, you're putting them in costumes where we're not showing you off, essentially. That's a bold move for a filmmaker to do. And typically actors are not going to want to have their faces covered all the time. You know, that's their money maker. So having everyone in veils, especially Rebecca Ferguson, I was like, man, she is behind this veil constantly throughout this movie. And when she's not, she's covered in the tattoos. And it's like props. Because it helps. It helps take or make that disconnection from, and Jake, I think you talked about this during our awards show, actually, of like, there are so many times where you still see the actor just portraying a character in a movie. And I think in a movie like this, to completely disconnect that connection, now you full on are like, nope, you are just this character. You are Jessica. You're not Rebecca Ferguson anymore. That's awesome.
Yeah, you get sucked into the world.
Yeah, I think it adds more strength to the actor to be able to do that. I would assume it would give them more freedom to portray the characters as they're wanting to. I was shocked at how many faces are covered by something or completely throughout the 3-hour film that Dune Part 2 is.
I think we'll leave it there, people. The movie Bonerz, Dustin, Jake, you have been amazing as always, chatting movies, and especially Dune Part 2.
Always a pleasure.
It's time to say goodbye, people. It's goodbye from Dustin. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It's goodbye from Jake. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.
And it's goodbye from me. I'm going to go back to my worm piss. Bye-bye. That's it for spoilers, guys. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell me what your thoughts are about this film. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for X at FVF_podcast. Plus, we are now on YouTube, so hit that like button and comment there. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.